Hello, today I'm going over chemical signals across the cell membrane lecture. So we've already introduced the cell membrane, kind of the skin of the cell, and its structure. It has a nonpolar inside and it has a polar outside. So some stuff we've said passes through the cell membrane and some stuff doesn't. All right, so we're going to get into how does a cell signal either through or across the cell membrane. Cells communicate with each other using chemical signals that must cross or interact with the cell membrane. These signals, often called ligands, include hormones, neurotransmitters, and other molecules. So here we have our cell membrane that's in the orange and red here. You have outside of the cell and then inside the cell. And it's just showing, it says some ligands. You see these ligands, like this one in yellow here. It's not going to go through the cell. It stays on the outside of the cell, and it's just going to make contact with this receptor. Because the cell membrane is made of a phospholipid bilayer, it is selectively permeable and only allows certain substances to pass through easily. This means cells need different methods to receive signals depending on the type of molecule. So obviously if it's something where the signaling molecule, where the ligand, some are going to be able to pass right through, and that is going to be able to continue a message on to the inside of the cell, where some are going to need to go through channels. Some chemical signals are small and nonpolar, allowing them to pass directly through the cell membrane. So that's what we have here. This is showing you a signaling molecule. This is the ligand, and it's going to pass straight through the cell membrane or plasma membrane right here. Once inside, they bind to intracellular receptors, which are typically located in the cytoplasm or nucleus. So once this signaling molecule comes through that skin, then it's going to bind with something else to cause some kind of an action. In this case, it's going to interact with the DNA. Now, this intracellular receptor will not interact with that DNA unless that signaling molecule is attached. That's how a signal is being transferred from one cell to another. This molecule goes across, attaches to this receptor. Now that whole complex will go and interact in some way with the DNA. It gets very detailed. So this is just the first initial explanations. Let's see. These receptors often act as transcription factors, meaning they can turn genes on or off. That could be one thing that's happening here. It could be turning off a gene or turning on the gene once that signal came in. Steroid hormones are a common example of signals that use intracellular receptors. Okay. Other signals are too large or too polar to cross the membrane, so they must bind to membrane receptors on the cell surface. Okay, so here we just have, again, this same type of image where you have outside of the cell and inside of the cell. You have ligands that will stay outside of the cell. So this is a messenger that's going to attach itself to this receptor. And you'll notice that the receptor goes across the cell membrane. It has a portion outside and a portion inside, right? These receptors are proteins embedded in the cell membrane with a binding site facing outside the cell and inside, usually. When a ligand binds, the receptor changes shape and triggers a response inside of the cell. In this image, I think that what they were trying to show was, here's the receptor without the ligand attached, and it has this extra little bit sitting there. And then when the ligand does attach, it has released this to go send some kind of a message, to continue the message inside of the cell. That's the changing shape and triggering a response inside of the cell. This process is known as signal transduction and often involves a series of steps called a signaling pathway. So the pathway, what they're describing, we're going to get to that in this next picture down here. It just means there can be, after this first signaling event, there might be many steps that then take place, a cascade of events or multiple events that all happen one after the other as this signal moves forward. Membrane receptors can activate different types of internal responses depending on their structure and function. For example, some receptors open ion channels while others activate enzymes or secondary messengers inside the cell. And this is one of those where it's activating enzymes and secondary messengers, actually, because you've got your ligand here that's going to bind to this membrane receptor, this protein. Once that happens, a change to this protein causes a change to this protein, which allows this process to happen. When that happens, this happens. When that happens, this happens. That's the cascade that we were talking about, where one thing after another happens to eventually send the message or signal that you need. Secondary messengers, such as cyclic AMP, help amplify the signal so the response is stronger. You do see that here. This allows even a small amount of signaling molecule to produce a large effect within the cell. Okay, again, this gets much more detailed. This is just our introduction to it. We're just trying to figure out the basic structure and function of these parts. All right, hope this helps. Thank you very much.